"Here's $1,000. Just hold my hand," the CEO said, not expecting the poor girl to change his life. Logan Shaw gripped the steering wheel a little tighter as the rain tapped steadily against the windshield. The rhythmic sound should have been soothing, but nothing could quiet the storm building inside his chest. The city lights blurred through the downpour, casting silver streaks across his midnight blue Aston Martin. He had been driving aimlessly for nearly an hour now, avoiding a destination he could not bear to face alone. He was 34, CEO of one of the most sought-after architectural firms in the country. Magazine covers called him the visionary builder, clients called him a genius, but no one called him warm. No one ever called him real. Tonight, his best friend was getting engaged. The guest list was filled with former classmates, business partners, reporters, and a string of names Logan had long stopped pretending to care about. They were all expecting him to arrive, polished, powerful, and hand in hand with Amelia, the woman who had graced his arm for 2 years. Except Amelia had walked out just 3 days ago, tired of the silence, tired of loving a man who, in her words, was never really there. Logan had not told anyone. He hated the idea of people whispering behind their glasses of champagne. The pity, the gossip, the looks. His thoughts were interrupted by the figure at the bus stop. A woman. Alone. She sat hunched beneath the dim, flickering street lamp, the rain soaking through her thin coat. Her long, golden hair clung in wet strands to her cheeks as she clutched a worn canvas tote tightly to her chest. Her knees were drawn up, her shoulders curved inward as if bracing against a world that had not been kind. She did not look up at first. Logan slowed down, something tugging at him. There was nothing remarkable about her clothes, thrift store layers at best, but there was something in the stillness of her, the way she sat there, unbothered by the rain, unmoved by the cold. He could not explain why it held him, only that it did. He rolled the car to a quiet stop near the curb. Her eyes lifted then, blue, tired, cautious. Logan hesitated for half a second. Then he lowered the window. The sound of rain rushed in. She blinked, startled. "I am going to ask something unusual," he said, voice calm, even. She said nothing. Logan reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded bill. Crisp, dry, $1,000 in cash. He held it up without flourish. "Here's $1,000, he said. "Just hold my hand for the night. Pretend to be my date." There was no flirtation in his tone, no sleaze, no arrogance, just tired honesty. She stared at the money, then at him. Her expression did not change, not suspicion, not interest, just calculation. The rain ran rivulets down her temples. Finally, she spoke. "Only if you promise to treat me like a human," she said quietly, "not a trophy." Logan let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. He reached across and unlocked the passenger door. Without another word, she stood, adjusted her grip on the tattered tote, and climbed in. As she settled into the leather seat, the door closed softly behind her, shutting out the rain. The air inside the car was warm, but between them hung a silence heavier than the storm. Logan glanced sideways at her. She stared straight ahead. He put the car in drive. Neither of them spoke as they pulled away from the curb, but something had shifted. The silence in the car stretched as the city lights streaked past the windows. Logan kept his eyes on the road, but his mind circled around the woman sitting beside him. Her presence was quiet, but not passive. She radiated a certain stillness, like someone who had learned to take up less space in the world, but not because she wanted to. She finally broke the silence. "My name's Juliet," she said, voice low, almost reluctant. "But people call me Jules." Logan glanced sideways. She was still staring out the window, raindrops distorting the world beyond. "Logan," he offered. "Shaw, I know who you are." Her tone was flat, not impressed, not curious, just factual. "You do?" he asked. "You built the Langford Library downtown. My mom used to take me there as a kid, before she passed." Logan nodded, unsure of what to say. Jules adjusted the strap of her soaked tote bag. Her hands were slender, her nails short and clean, the skin on her knuckles slightly cracked from cold and wear. "I need to make a few things clear before we go any further with this arrangement," she said, finally turning to look at him. Her blue eyes were sharp now, no longer guarded but firm. Logan raised an eyebrow. "Okay. 1, she began, holding up a single finger. "No touching unless absolutely necessary. Hand-holding was part of the deal. That's all." "Fair enough," Logan said. 2, she continued, "do not lie about me or my family. I'm not some mysterious heiress or your childhood sweetheart who returned from Europe. I'm not anything. I'm just a woman who got caught in the rain." A flicker of something, pain, crossed her face, but it was gone in an instant. "And 3, she said, voice hardening slightly, "do not say anything in front of those people tonight that would make me feel disposable. If you brought me along to make a point, make it without turning me into some arm candy with a sob story. I'm not a conversation piece." Logan looked at her for a long moment. He had not expected this. He thought he would pick up a stranger, walk into the party with a date, say a few words, and leave. Simple. Clean. No questions asked. But Jules Whitmore had rules, principles, and she was not afraid to defend them. "You really think I'd treat you like that?" he asked, a hint of something defensive in his tone. "I do not know you," she replied, "but I've met enough men who look like you to know it's worth saying." A beat of silence passed. Then Logan, instead of getting offended, laughed softly under his breath. It was the first real sound of amusement he had made all night. "You're not what I expected," he said. "I usually am not," Jules replied, staring forward again. They drove for a few minutes in silence before Logan spoke again. "What do you do when you are not taking strange offers in the rain?" Jules hesitated, then said, "I used to be a student teacher, English Lit. But there was an incident at the school. One of my students was being harassed by a senior teacher. I reported it. They said I was stirring things up. My contract was not renewed." Logan's knuckles tightened slightly on the wheel. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "Yeah," she murmured. "So was I. Still am sometimes." He glanced at her again, and for the first time since the evening began, he stopped seeing her as the woman at the bus stop and started seeing her as someone with layers he might never fully understand. But something in him wanted to try. The valet opened the car door, and Logan stepped out into the soft glow of the entrance lights. The rain had faded into a drizzle, but the marble steps still glistened underfoot. He circled to the passenger side, opening the door for Jules. She stepped out, pulling her coat tighter around her shoulders. The dress beneath it, simple, navy blue, modest, clung gently to her figure, rain-kissed and creased, but elegant in its understatement. Her golden hair had dried in loose waves around her shoulders. There was no makeup, no jewelry, no pretense. And yet, the moment they walked in, every head turned. Not because she was the most glamorous woman in the room, she was not, but because she walked beside Logan Shaw with quiet confidence, her hand slipping naturally into his, as if it had belonged there all along. They entered the ballroom under a cascade of chandeliers, the soft hum of a string quartet in the background. Logan felt the usual tightening in his chest, eyes watching, expectations thick in the air, but Jules showed no sign of discomfort. She offered a small smile to those they passed, neither overly warm nor cold, just present. At the far side of the room, a group of elegantly dressed women watched them with narrowed eyes. "That must be the mystery girl," one whispered. "She looks like she shops at consignment stores," another murmured. "She is probably just a flavor of the week. Logan never brings the same woman twice." Jules glanced in their direction, heard every word, and smiled, not politely, but with a hint of amusement. As they approached the main table, one of the women stepped forward. Tall, wrapped in emerald silk and perfume, she extended her hand toward Logan. "Logan, darling, you have been keeping secrets," she said, eyes flicking to Jules. And who is your lovely guest?" Before Logan could answer, Jules spoke first. "Juliet Whitmore," she said calmly, shaking the woman's hand. "But people who like me call me Jules. People who do not usually try harder." The woman blinked, stunned into silence. Logan almost laughed. They took their seats. A waiter poured wine into Jules's glass, and she nodded her thanks before turning to Logan. "You are quiet," she said. "I do not like these things. I thought you were the kind of man who thrives on rooms like this." "Everyone here wants something," he said flatly. Jules looked around. Men in tailored suits discussing mergers, women comparing diamond cuts, waitstaff moving like ghosts between tables. "Is this table full?" she asked softly. "But you still feel alone?" Logan did not answer. Instead, he stared at his plate, the food untouched. Jules did not press. The evening carried on with toasts and laughter. Conversations drifted across the table. A few guests brought up Logan's upcoming projects, skyline-changing builds in 3 major cities, but none of them asked him how he was or if he was happy. Then someone made a careless remark. "So, where's Amelia tonight? Did she get tired of these boring events?" Logan stiffened. Jules leaned forward before he could speak. "She and I flipped a coin," she said smoothly. "I won." There was a pause. Then laughter. Even Logan smiled, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. As dessert was served, Jules excused herself briefly, returning a few minutes later with 2 glasses of water, one for herself, one for Logan. "You looked like you needed a reset," she said. He took it without a word, but his fingers brushed hers. Just a second longer than necessary. Later, they slipped outside to the balcony for air. The night was cool, the sky still heavy with leftover storm clouds. City lights shimmered in the distance. Jules leaned against the stone railing, arms crossed. "When I was teaching," she said quietly, "I learned something about kids. The ones who act like they do not need anything usually need the most, especially hugs." Logan turned to her. Her voice was not pitying. It was just truth. He said nothing. She glanced at him, then smiled, small, understanding, and impossibly kind. He looked at her for a long time, not because she was beautiful, but because she saw straight through him. And she did not look away. The clinking of forks against dessert plates began to settle as the lights dimmed slightly. A spotlight turned toward the stage at the front of the grand ballroom, where the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone and smiled. "And now," he announced warmly, "we invite Logan Shaw, dear friend of the groom and the man responsible for designing the very venue you are sitting in tonight, to say a few words." Polite applause rippled through the room. Logan remained seated for a moment too long. Jules turned to him gently. "You okay?" He gave a slight nod, stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward the stage. Every step echoed in his head like it was heavier than the one before. He climbed the short staircase to the platform, standing in front of 100 expectant faces, familiar faces, names he had closed deals with, built towers with, smiled beside at ribbon cuttings, faces that knew his accolades, his precision, his vision, but not his soul. He reached for the microphone, his fingers wrapped around it, but nothing came out. He looked down at the podium, then up again. People were smiling, waiting. He cleared his throat once, twice. Still nothing. His gaze swept across the room until it found her, Jules. Sitting calmly at their table, hands folded in her lap, watching him. No pressure, no expectation, just watching him like he was human, not a headline. The lump in his throat tightened. His mouth opened slightly, but again, the words refused to form. Then movement. Jules rising from her seat. She walked quietly, unhurried, all eyes now shifting toward her. A few confused glances, a few whispers. She joined him on the stage and gently placed her hand over his on the microphone. Their fingers touched, brief, grounding. Then she turned to the crowd. "I am not anyone important," she began, voice steady, warm. "Not a celebrity, not part of this world." People leaned in. but I've spent the last few hours watching Logan Shaw, and not the version you all talk about in boardrooms or on magazine covers." A hush fell. I watched a man who listens more than he speaks, who notices people but rarely lets himself be noticed. I watched a man who shows up, perfectly pressed and composed, because that is what the world demands of him, but who, deep down, is still wondering if anyone sees past the title. Jules glanced at Logan, just for a moment. "Tonight, you asked him to speak," she continued. "But what you may not realize is that some of the strongest people are silent because they are always carrying the noise for everyone else." The room was still, utterly still. "Logan Shaw does not need another award," she said. "He does not need more praise. He just needs one person, one real person to see him. Not the architect, not the CEO. Just the man who, like all of us, is still looking for a little warmth in a very cold world." She stepped back. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was reverent. Then, slowly, a single person clapped, then another, then the room filled with applause, not thunderous, but heartfelt, lingering, sincere. Logan looked at her, eyes unreadable. But his posture shifted, ever so slightly. Not straighter, just softer. The party had ended in a blur of handshakes, polite nods, and final toasts. Logan had walked Jules to the car, under the weight of a silence neither of them tried to break. It was not awkward, it was full. Full of things unsaid, thoughts unprocessed, emotions neither had expected to feel. When they reached the car, Jules opened the passenger door before he could. She climbed in quietly, unzipping her tote. As Logan settled into the driver's seat, he heard the soft slide of paper. He glanced down. A white envelope lay on the console between them. He looked at it, then at her. She stared straight ahead. "I said I would take the money," she murmured, "but I don't want to." Before he could respond, she opened the door again. "Thank you for tonight," she said, stepping into the night without waiting for an answer. Logan watched her disappear into the quiet dark, her figure shrinking against the rows of street lamps and soft city sounds. The door clicked shut behind her. He sat there for a long time. The envelope remained unopened in his hand, slightly creased from her grip. The money inside felt heavier than it should have, like it had absorbed something unspoken. He did not drive away. Not immediately. He stared out the windshield, watching raindrops trace slow paths down the glass. It was only after the heater began to hum that he finally moved, placing the envelope gently in the glove compartment. 2 days later, Logan stepped out of his black SUV in front of an old community center on the south side of the city. His firm had agreed to fund the renovation of the playground and classrooms. It was meant to be a quiet philanthropic gesture, something his PR team had pushed for months, and he had finally agreed to without much thought. The building was modest, with chipped paint and bright murals. Children's laughter echoed from somewhere behind the main hall. Logan adjusted the collar of his coat as he walked up the steps, ready to exchange pleasantries with the coordinator and be on his way. He had not expected to see her, but there she was. Jules stood at the front of a classroom, barefoot on the playmat, surrounded by a group of children. She was reading aloud from a battered picture book, her voice animated, her expressions exaggerated and playful. The kids laughed at every silly voice she made. She looked alive in a way he had not seen before. Not polished, not poised, just herself. She saw him standing in the doorway and paused, surprise flashing across her face. A few of the kids turned around, then went back to their coloring. Jules excused herself and walked toward him, wiping her hands on her dress. "Well," she said, arms crossed, "small city." "I could say the same," Logan replied. "What are you doing here?" "My company is funding the playground remodel." She nodded slowly. "Of course you are." He hesitated. "I did not know you worked here." "I don't, not officially," she said. "I volunteer when they'll have me. Sometimes teach a story hour, help with tutoring." He looked around. The walls were covered in crayon art. The chairs were mismatched. It smelled like glue and hope. "You're good with them," he said. "I was supposed to be," she said softly. "I had a job once, a real one." She looked down at her feet, then back at him. "There was a student," she continued. "He was getting bullied by another teacher. I reported it. The school claimed I was exaggerating, said I was trying to stir up drama. My contract ended the next week." Logan's jaw tightened. After that, every interview led nowhere. No references, no trust. You get branded as trouble once, and that's it. He did not respond, not with words, but something in his eyes shifted. Not pity, something quieter. Respect. Understanding. Recognition. Logan showed up the next morning. He was early, before the doors of the community center even opened, before the smell of crayons and instant coffee filled the air, before the kids started tumbling in with their mismatched backpacks and morning energy. He brought coffee, not just for himself. 2 cups. When Jules arrived, a little out of breath and carrying her usual tote bag, she found him on the front steps with a cardboard tray in hand and that same unreadable look on his face. She raised an eyebrow. "Is this a coincidence?" Logan shrugged. "Maybe. You planning to renovate more buildings in the neighborhood?" "No," he said, holding out one of the cups. "Not unless you ask me to." Jules took it, but her eyes stayed on his. "You don't have to come back here, you know." "I know." They stood for a moment in the soft quiet of the early morning. She sipped her coffee. "Still, it's nice." Logan came back the next day. And the day after that? At first, he just helped move chairs, clean up stray glitter, and read the occasional storybook. But eventually, it became more. He helped with after-school homework sessions. He learned a few of the kids' names. He started to laugh again, not the polite kind he used at board meetings, but the kind that snuck out of him, real and unguarded. Jules noticed the change before he did. One afternoon, she walked past the main room and found him crouched on the floor, coloring a poster with a 6-year-old boy who insisted on using only purple. Logan's tie was tucked into his shirt. There was a smudge of green marker on his wrist. He looked up and grinned when he saw her. Later, as they packed up glue sticks and construction paper, Jules said softly, "You know, you don't have to come here every day just to see me." Logan looked at her. "I don't come to see you," he said. "I come because I've started missing the sound of real laughter." Her smile was small, and it stayed for a long time. They began spending time outside the center, groceries, thrift stores, Saturday mornings at the park watching street performers with the kids from the program. Sometimes, no words were exchanged for minutes at a time, but the silence between them had shifted. It was no longer heavy. It felt safe. One evening, Jules invited him over. Her apartment was small, a single-room studio with peeling paint, a cracked window, and a flickering overhead light. But it was warm, and it smelled faintly of cinnamon. She made tea in chipped mugs. On one wall, a collage of handwritten notes and drawings covered nearly every inch. Crayon hearts, misspelled words, stick figures with capes labeled Miss Jules. He stood in front of it for a long time. "They used to be my students," she said quietly. "Most of them aren't in school anymore." He turned to her. "They deserve better," he said. "I know," she whispered. That night, Logan made a phone call. No announcements, no grand gestures, just quiet action. By the end of the week, 3 of Jules's former students had been quietly re-enrolled in nearby schools, their tuition anonymously covered. More followed in the weeks ahead. Jules never asked who was behind it, but she suspected. There was always an envelope, always unsigned. One afternoon, as they sat on a bench watching the kids play tag, Jules turned to him. "If you hadn't seen me at that bus stop," she asked, "would you even remember that day?" Logan was quiet for a moment. "No," he said honestly, "because I had forgotten how to remember days like that." She looked at him. He looked back. And for the first time, he reached for her hand, not because of a deal, not because of an audience, but because he simply wanted to. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning. A tabloid headline plastered across newsstands and social media feeds in bold, accusatory letters. Logan Shaw's mystery woman. Charity case or gold digger. There was a blurry photo of Jules exiting the community center, her tote bag slung over her shoulder, hair pulled back into a low bun. Another photo showed Logan walking beside her, coffee cups in hand. The caption read, "The reclusive billionaire and the unknown woman. More than just philanthropy." By noon, the speculation had exploded online. People dug through old-school websites, tried to link her to Logan's past, guessed her background. Jules's name trended before she even knew it. Accusations flew. Social climber, kept woman, fake volunteer. Comments poured in. She's clearly using him. Can't believe someone like Logan would fall for a charity girl. He's too smart for this, right? Jules found out from a coworker at the center. She stared at the screen, scrolling through the posts in silence. Her heart beat unevenly. Shame, confusion, and something deeper, betrayal, settled in her chest like a weight. She left early that day. That evening, Logan showed up at her apartment. She opened the door halfway, her body blocking the rest. "I saw it," he said softly. "Of course you did," Jules replied, arms crossed. "Everyone did. I never wanted this to happen. I tried to keep things private. But you didn't say anything, did you?" Her voice was low but sharp. "You let them drag me. You let them decide who I was." "I didn't want to make it worse," he said. "If I gave them more attention, it would have. It would have made it real," she cut in. He flinched at that. Jules took a step back, eyes shining but hard. "I thought you saw me. I thought, maybe, for once I wasn't someone to be used for a night, for a story, for convenience." "You're not," Logan said quickly. "You're not. But you didn't say that. Not to them." Logan opened his mouth, but nothing came. Her disappointment filled the silence like thunder. "I don't care that people know," she said. "What hurts is that when it mattered, you chose silence." She closed the door gently, without another word. 3 days later, Logan called a press conference. It was unannounced. No PR team, no strategic leaks, just a podium outside the entrance of the new community center playground, half built behind him. Cameras flashed. Reporters murmured. Logan stepped up, no notes in hand. "I know there's been speculation," he began, "about the woman I've been seen with, about her intentions, about mine." He paused. "Let me clear the record." Silence. "Juliet Whitmore is not someone I hired. She is not a mystery woman. She is not a project or a problem to fix." He looked straight into the lens of the nearest camera. "She is the reason I remembered how to be human again." Reporters froze, pens and cameras motionless. "She's the first person who looked at me and didn't see a brand or a bank account. She saw a man who had forgotten what it meant to feel, really feel." He took a breath. "And I failed her. I let my fear of public perception get in the way of protecting her from it. That's on me. But make no mistake, she changed my life. Not by being perfect, but by being real." He stepped back. The internet erupted. Within hours, the headlines flipped. Logan Shaw breaks silence. Defends realest woman he's ever known. Not a gold digger, a mirror. CEO comes clean about relationship. The comments turned softer, supportive, curious. Jules watched the live stream alone in her apartment, her tea forgotten on the counter. When Logan said the words, "She is the reason I remembered how to be human again," her hand went to her mouth, and for the first time in days, she let herself cry. The small wooden box arrived in the early morning, left neatly on Jules's doorstep. No card, no name, just her name engraved on a smooth brass plate, polished enough to reflect the soft blush of dawn. She carried it inside with quiet fingers and placed it on the kitchen table. For a moment, she just stared at it. Then, slowly, she lifted the lid. Inside lay a crumpled envelope, familiar, worn, and still folded exactly the way she had left it in Logan's car that night. Nestled beneath it, a single square of cream-colored paper. His handwriting was neat, careful, as if every word mattered. The first time, it was to borrow a hand. This time, If you'll allow it, let it be because you want to hold mine. Not for money, not for a part to play, but for real. L. Jules let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She sat back, the paper trembling slightly in her grip, not from uncertainty, but from everything she had carried alone for so long finally finding a place to land. The next day, Logan sat at his desk, staring out over the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling glass of his office. He was supposed to be on a call. The line blinked on hold. His assistant knocked twice, quietly, and then opened the door. "She's here." Logan stood immediately. Jules stepped inside, dressed in her usual cardigan and jeans, a canvas tote slung over her shoulder. No makeup, no pretense. Her hair was a little windswept from the morning breeze. She did not speak right away. Instead, she walked up to his desk and set something down. A letter. Childlike handwriting sprawled across the front in purple marker. "Dear Miss Jules." He picked it up, reading silently. "Thank you for not giving up on us. We love you so much, and thank the man who helped you come back. He must be a good one. From Jordan, the one who always spills glue." Logan smiled. When he looked up, Jules was already watching him. "I didn't come here to say thank you," she said, "or to make things easy. I came because I needed to know if this, us, can be something real." He stepped around the desk, slowly, like approaching something sacred. "I'm not asking you to become someone you're not," she added. "And I can't promise I'll always be easy to love, but if you're willing to try." Logan reached for her hand, no hesitation this time. "I'm ready," he said softly. "And yes, I'm ready to love a teacher who works for free, who saves kids, and who once walked into my life with rain in her hair and fire in her voice." Jules laughed, a quiet, tear-glass kind of sound. Outside, the clouds had returned, the sky grumbling softly with the promise of rain. They walked out together, side by side. The first drops began to fall, gentle and cool. Neither reached for an umbrella. They just walked. No words, no labels. Only fingers, laced together, not borrowed, not bought. Held, for real. Thank you for watching this soul-stirring journey of love, healing, and quiet courage. If this story touched your heart, if you saw a piece of yourself in Jules or Logan, then you know, sometimes, all it takes is a hand held in the rain to remind us what it means to be truly seen. If you felt something real today, don't forget to subscribe and hit that hype button to support soul-stirring stories, where we bring you heartfelt tales that heal, inspire, and stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Until next time, keep your heart open. You never know whose life you're about to change, or who might change yours. See you in the next story.